Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're taking a deep dive into something I think we can all relate to, especially in our increasingly digital world.
And that is, of course, security and privacy online. It can feel overwhelming, right?
Definitely. Like, where do you even begin? Which is why, lucky for us, one of our listeners sent in 10 awesome tech hacks they use to stay safe and secure.
10? That's a pretty solid list. I'm curious to hear what they came up with.
Me too. I think it's brilliant to get these practical tips straight from someone who's already using them.
Okay.
So let's jump right in. First up, we've got two-factor authentication. I think most people have heard of this, but maybe not everyone's using it yet.
Yeah, and it's so important. I like to explain it as like adding an extra lock on your front door.
I love that analogy. It makes it super simple to understand. So instead of just relying on your password, which someone could potentially steal, you also need a second factor.
Exactly, like a code that gets sent to your phone or using an authentication app. And, some people think it's a hassle, but honestly, it takes like 2 seconds and it can literally save you from a ton of trouble.
Totally agree. Especially for those super important accounts like your bank or your email. Like those are the ones you definitely want to lock down tight. Okay, so moving on to something that I think is both super cool and a little bit creepy. Biometrics.
Ah, yes. Fingerprint scanners and facial recognition. The future is here.
Right. I mean, it's incredibly convenient. No more remembering those complex passwords.
Or getting shoulder surfed, which is always a risk, especially if you're like in a public place.
True. But then there's that whole question of like, where is all this biometric data being stored?
Yeah.
And who has access to it?
Right. And that's where it gets a little tricky. It really depends on your personal comfort level. Some people are fine with the trade-off of convenience for potential privacy concerns.
For sure. I think it's something we should all be aware of and make informed decisions about. Okay, next up, we have privacy settings. This is one that I feel like a lot of people overlook.
Totally. We click accept without even thinking about it, right?
All the time. I remember I was once looking at my phone's settings and I saw that some random app had access to my location. I was like, why on earth does this need to know where I am?
Right. It's crazy. It's so important to actually go into your settings and review what each app has permission to access.
Totally. Like, does your weather app really need to know your location 24/7? Probably not.
Nope. It only needs it when you're actually checking the weather.
Exactly. So you can customize those settings and really take control of your data. Okay, this next one is near and dear to my heart because I am terrible at remembering passwords.
Oh, tell me about it. I used to have a notebook full of them, which I know is super unsafe.
I know. But what else are you supposed to do when you have, like, a million different accounts?
That's where password managers come in. They're lifesavers, honestly.
Okay, so tell me more about how they work.
So basically, a password manager generates super strong, unique passwords for all your different accounts. And it stores them securely, so you don't have to remember them all.
Sounds amazing. But is it safe to trust all your passwords to one app?
That's a valid concern. But there are lots of reputable password managers out there with strong encryption and security protocols.
Got it. So it's like anything else online, do your research and choose a service you feel comfortable with. Okay, next up, let's talk about AirDrop and Quick Share.
Oh, those are handy features. But they can also be a bit of a privacy risk. You're not careful.
For sure. I remember once I was sitting in a coffee shop and I got a random AirDrop from someone I didn't know. It was kind of creepy, not gonna lie.
Yeah, you definitely want to make sure you've got those settings adjusted so you're not just open to anyone sending you stuff.
So walk me through how to do that.
It's pretty simple. You can usually find the settings in your phone's main settings menu. You can choose to only receive AirDrops or quick shares from your contacts, or you can turn it off completely.
Easy peasy. All right, now for something that I think we've all fallen victim to at some point, the allure of free public Wi-Fi.
Oh, I know. Airports, coffee shops, hotels. It's so tempting.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's that voice in the back of your head that's like, is this really a good idea?
And that voice is right to be cautious. Public Wi-Fi is inherently less secure than your home network.
So what's the danger?
Well, other people on that network could potentially see the data you're sending and receiving. So things like online banking or shopping are definitely a no-go on public Wi-Fi.
Yikes. Okay, so what can you do if you absolutely need to use public Wi-Fi?
VPN. It creates a secure, encrypted tunnel for your data.
So it's like putting a shield around your information.
Exactly. It makes it much harder for anyone to snoop on what you're doing.
Okay, good to know. Now let's talk about online shopping. I personally feel a lot more comfortable using digital wallets like Apple Pay or PayPal.
And you should. They're definitely a safer way to pay online.
Why is that?
Because when you use a digital wallet, you're not actually giving the merchant your credit card information directly. The wallet acts as a middleman, which adds an extra layer of protection.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's like one less place where your info could potentially be compromised. All right, let's move on to something that can be pretty scary: phishing attempts.
Ugh, yes. Those emails or texts that try to trick you into giving up your personal information.
I got one recently that looked exactly like it was from my bank. I almost clicked on the link, but then I noticed the sender's email address was slightly off.
That's a good catch. It's amazing how sophisticated these scams are getting.
So what are some red flags to watch out for?
Definitely look out for things like a sense of urgency, requests for your personal information, and any misspellings or grammatical errors.
Right, because legitimate companies usually have pretty good proofreading.
Exactly. And if you're ever unsure about an email or text, it's always best to contact the company directly using their official contact information, not the one provided in the message.
Great advice. Now let's talk about a worst case scenario. You lose your phone, panic sets in, what do you do?
Deep breaths. First things first, you want to make sure you have remote lock and wipe features enabled on your device.
I've heard of that, but I've never actually set it up. Is it complicated?
Not at all. It's usually pretty straightforward. You can find the settings in your phone's security menu.
So if my phone goes missing, I can basically lock it down remotely so no one can access my data.
Exactly. And if you think it's gone for good, you can even erase all your data remotely.
That's amazing. I'm definitely going to set that up right after this. Okay, last but not least, we have app audits. This sounds kind of intense.
It's not as scary as it sounds, I promise. It's basically like digital spring cleaning.
Okay, I can get behind that.
Yeah.
So what does an app audit involve?
Basically, you go through all the apps on your phone and ask yourself, do I really need this? If not, delete it.
Makes sense. And then what?
Then you check the permissions for the apps you do keep. Like, why does that game need access to your camera? If it doesn't make sense, revoke the permission.
It's all about minimizing those potential risks.
Exactly. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. What are your final thoughts for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that you don't have to be a tech expert to take control of your digital security and privacy. These 10 hacks are easy to implement and they can make a huge difference.
For sure. And you don't have to do everything all at once. Start with one or two things and go from there.
Exactly. Small steps can lead to big changes.
I love that. And on that note, I'm going to leave everyone with a question to ponder. What are your biggest concerns when it comes to digital security and privacy? And what steps are you taking to address those concerns? It's definitely something we all need to be thinking about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
See you next time.